sports betting brother, Nate, bring it up. And thanks for stopping by here at sportsbettinguniversity.com as we are partnering with OddsJam. OddsJam.com is a betting tool, a betting resource that we highly believe in, highly use ourselves, and want to incorporate that to help you get educated and get elevated. What we do is we do a roadmap on how to use market analytics tools and resources, as well as a betting blueprint or a roadmap so that they can identify very quickly and easily profitable bets, profitable money that is there and simple to do. So we're going to give you some tips and things today that you can go and find some teams that are covering the spread, ATS over 75%, whether it's sides and totals. We're going to get into that here in a minute and how you can incorporate that into your targeting wagers with OddsJam. So stick around and we'll get started right now. So basically, guys, what I've done here is I've identified what I call the playing from the tips method. Playing from the tips is basically when you have 130 college football teams, and let's say the top 20 have some very, very positive against the spread numbers, and we'll get into that here in a minute. So those are teams you would, of course, support and play more than not. And then contrarily, on the bottom of this momentum swing, you have teams that are underperforming and just simply can't seem to find a win, ATS. And so in the middle of all that, you have about 90 teams that are 500, up or down, back and forth. So what you want to do when I say playing from the tips is look at opportunities on both ends of the scale, whether that's ATS or whether that's ATS where the totals are sides. So I'm going to get into the next chart here and start to kind of kick this off so you have a better comprehension. So here we go. This is the top 20 ATS teams. And the reason why this is important is because these are the teams that are overperforming expectations, and you'll always find this in every sport, NFL, NBA, college basketball, etc. And if you just simply played these teams and kind of followed this market, you'd be 92-22 just with the top 20. These are teams covering the spread. Now, one thing I like to point out is typically you're going to have teams that maybe they didn't expect. Certainly Iowa is a team this year sort of has risen up and kind of come out of nowhere. Syracuse played a little bit better. Michigan State certainly, and of course Pittsburgh. Now, I like to look over here at the ATS plus or minus, and what this tells me is these teams are covering the spread. They're really not even coming close. They're, anytime they're double digits, they're winning very, very comfortably ATS. And so again, if you just were following these top 20 teams, blindly, randomly, in a perfect world, you come away certainly in this 92-22 range, which is unheard of. So if you kind of are shopping from the right stores, so to speak, for the right item, this is what you're going to find. So this is the top of the pile. And again, I like to try to find teams that are rising up and the odds makers are having a hard time honing in. Typically, if their margin of victory is close to zero and the ATS is close to zero, what that tells you is the odds makers are really dialed into that team. And so it makes it tough, more of a coin flip, so to speak. But if you can get an edge and find some teams that are just outperforming and the odds maker just can't keep up with them, that's what you want to do. So this is the top part of the tip of the ATS. So this is the other end of the 130 teams, and you can see here collectively 53-7 would be the number of ATS covers you would have if you were fading these horrid ATS or against the spread underperforming teams. And you can see here there's 0-5, 0-7, UNLV, New Mexico State, Navy, teams like this that are certainly not rising up to the expectations. I guess a team, you certainly Colorado, a 1-4 ATS, Vanderbilt, they've always been struggling. But you're going to find the teams here that I just would not want to get in front of or play them. Certainly you're going to have some regression, and you can't imagine these teams to stay at this bottom level, but surprisingly, the majority of them will. The majority of them will, period. And so by about week 4, week 5, this is when we start to see this happening in the NFL, the NBA. They are what they are at that point, right? They're Danny Green. So again, I like to find teams down here that are really margin of victory, the margins here, the -7, the -7, as high as you can here. This Ohio team, -12.5. I mean, man, the odds makers really having a hard time keeping up with them. And certainly Vanderbilt's very been tough to predict, predominantly on the losing side of things. So anytime you have a double-digit minus next to your name here, you're really struggling as far as the margins that are, the odds makers are having to keep up with. So this is the bottom of the pile. So again, playing from the tips means you play teams, you would fade teams at the bottom that can't seem to find the team bus, and you would ride the hot teams that I mentioned, the top 20 up above. And certainly you can get into the middle part of all these teams. So there again, if you have 20, 25 teams at each end, that leaves you with about 90 teams in the middle that, again, you certainly can make plays on, certainly can get on. It's just that this is kind of give you maybe a little bit of an insight on what the odds makers are struggling to get covered. You can do the same thing with totals. And here's what I did is I pulled up the top 20, actually 23 teams that are here that are predominantly hitting the overs. As you can see here, Pittsburgh's 5-0, Western Kentucky, Tulane 5-1, Missouri 5-1, Georgia State. So these are all teams that are predominantly hitting overs. So you can see in the total plus or minus to the far right, the double-digit numbers there, those are teams that are just blowing it out of the water. And so typically I would not want to be on an under if the top 5, 6, 7, 8 teams here are in that range. Not to say that I wouldn't play an under with this group of teams, but I'd want to have a heads up to know that, certainly the expectations are a little bit different from maybe what the odds makers are used to, trying to hone in on their percentages, their margin of victories, et cetera, et cetera. And then here's the unders, the top 20 under hitting teams. Purdue 0-5 on an over. They've hit every under that they've played. They're going up against Iowa this weekend. My gosh, I mean, Purdue's having a -17.2 in the margin of victory. So not just that an auto play, but you certainly would think that's going to be a lower scoring game, certainly with Purdue having a tough time getting enough points on the board, and then Iowa being a top defense. But you have Virginia 1-5, Kent State, Bowling Green, Washington State. You can see all the 1-5 teams. So my gosh, there's 83% against the spread playing these teams on these totals. And so if you know that they're predominantly not hitting over, they're hitting the under 80% of the time, what a great piece of information to know, right? So that's what we're looking at, and that's kind of just a tip that you can add to your betting knowledge. And so is some of the insights as you target teams coming out of OddsJam. And we'll talk more about more strategy here in a little bit. So that's what I wanted to cover, guys. When I say playing from the tips, basically you're going to look at the ATS point spread coverages, whether it's the top 20, bottom 20, potentially fading that bottom 20, and certainly considering riding the top 20. You can also get a little bit deeper in your research, and as the schedule comes out, you can identify if a team is a top ATS covering team versus and going up and playing a team that's at the very bottom. Sometimes that's a little hidden gem, is if you can identify, say, a top 5 ATS coverage and then a bottom 5, one that's struggling. Same thing you can do with the totals. So you want to kind of match that up and just take a quick little snapshot of those things and just kind of understand conceptually what you're walking into. Not that you would play it automatically, but this information helps you sort of make a decision with all that OddsJam puts out. OddsJam is going to have sides, totals, player props, everything under the sun. And this might help you sort of focus in a little bit on your plays and help you create that betting roadmap that you'll have for Saturday and Sunday coming up. And again, you can do this with the NFL, you can do this with the NBA, college basketball, et cetera. And inevitably, every single year, you're going to have several teams that sort of rise, as a dark horse and kind of come up and outperform expectations. Those are the teams you want to ride. The teams you want to fade are the teams that just they're struggling, they're underperforming, and just cannot find the team bus every single week. And those teams are typically kind of standing out because they're going to be teams that normally you would expect to be getting wins, and they're just having down years and struggling years. And at this point of the year, this point of the season, week 4, week 5, week 6, going forward, they pretty much are what they are. I'm going to do a little experiment to see if by playing the top 10, top 15 ATS, playing those teams, playing the bottom 10, bottom 15 ATS, and just do a little experiment to kind of continue the season out to see what would happen if a person blindly just did that. Be a little experiment that I'm going to do, and I'll keep everyone up to date on how that turns out. So hopefully that'll be interesting science we can continue to bring you to help you consistently pick better winners and bet like a sharp. All right, guys, last thing here is hope you enjoyed this information. Hopefully it's going to open your eyes to maybe some ways to hone in and have a little strategy to helping you focus on your selections to be a lot more profitable to use OddsJam, use the OddsJam market information and sort of correlate that with teams that, have a lot of momentum. You can have correction, the market can correct and these teams can kind of go the other way. But at this time of the year, again, I've proven and seen over and over and over that these teams kind of are what they are at this particular point. And certainly they're going to have a week or two where they'll get a cover or they'll do something you didn't anticipate. But by and large, they are who they are at this particular time of the year, and I would definitely use this information wisely. So that's the kind of content we'll have, more of this type of thing coming out on YouTube with the YouTube channel. So make sure you join the OddsJam YouTube channel as well as Twitter. And also want to invite you over to the website at sportsbetuniversity.com. We have a free Bachelors of Betting video. This is basically a quick 15-minute video that I put together on the positives, the negatives, the expectations, and sort of the trials and tribulations of what you can anticipate being a sports bettor. So if you're just getting started and you're kind of new, maybe you're been doing this for a while but had a lot of struggles, it's sort of a platform or a landing spot you can go check out and just kind of get some true, honest information and insight on what your next steps could be or might be for yourself. And hopefully it's very helpful content for you. So stop by the website at sportsbetuniversity.com and get that for yourself. And we'll talk to you soon. I'm going to come up with another podcast, I suppose, here that we're going to talk about some selections and picks for the upcoming week, the upcoming Saturday and Sunday for football. And I'll be doing that podcast. Join us over at Anchor and also on Twitter. You'll be seeing that podcast come out for those tips and that market report going forward. So, all right, guys, appreciate your listenership and your followership. We'll talk to you soon.